Hello, my name is Ray Pianca, and I am judge of the Cleveland Municipal Housing Court. The Housing Court in Cleveland is a unique court. In fact, there are only 3 courts in the state of Ohio that address the issues specifically within their jurisdictions of enforcement of the housing codes. The Housing Court in Cleveland has jurisdiction given to it by the codified ordinances of the City of Cleveland. And as you can see, this document that was passed by Cleveland City Council sets various standards, minimum standards, of how people shall maintain their property and conduct their business in the City of Cleveland. The Housing Court in Cleveland is charged with enforcing the Building Code, Housing Code, Zoning Code, Fire Code, Health Code, Sidewalk Code, and also the State Agriculture Code on cases that come before it. The purpose of these videos today is to help people so they won't become defendants in the Cleveland Municipal Court. And the thousands of cases that we have could be addressed through proper maintenance of properties. Our video today will deal with one aspect of property maintenance and will hopefully provide some helpful hints for people to maintain their homes and keep out of Cleveland Housing Court. We're here today on Scranton Road at a home that is 120 years old. This home has been before the Cleveland Housing Court for lack of maintenance and has a number of elements that would be applicable to other homes throughout the city of Cleveland. One of the elements of most exterior maintenance problems that come before the court is lack of maintenance on porches. That lack of maintenance causes a number of problems, and we have Jim LaRue here today who is going to answer some questions on why porches fail and what you need to do to maintain the porches on homes in houses in the city of Cleveland. We're really glad to have you here, Jim.
Thanks. Good morning. There are several basic things for failure of a porch, and the most common is the simple maintenance that's ignored, and moisture is what then kills the porch. Let me just point out a couple things, Ray, and if there are any other things that come up from your experience on the bench, let us know.
All right.
Because the porch is outside, we often ignore taking care of it because it's not raining in on us. So we see a little leak here, we see a little moisture there, and we say, oh yeah, one of these days I'm going to take care of that. Well, eventually what happens is it starts to deteriorate and we lose it. If there's some problems with the roof and the moisture leaks through, we'll often see deterioration where posts are on the porch. We'll see deterioration in the ceiling. We'll see boards starting to buckle in the ceiling, and it may be simply a minor spot on the roof which needs to be patched or a shingle replaced, and that would have eliminated that problem and saved hundreds of dollars of new roof repair.
So a small leak in the roof could cause damage farther down, not
all the
just
way
on
down.
the roof.
Sometimes it can move all the way down. Some of the hollow column posts on our porches, water can run down through those posts, hit the floor inside the post, and then starts the deterioration a whole layer down.
How long a period of time does it take it before it really starts to show?
Well, wood is amazingly forgiving if it can dry.
Ah.
So wood gets wet and then it dries, it wets and dries, and it's not a problem. But when it is continuously wet, then that's when the problem, or if it can't dry out. And so inside that post, moisture gets there from outside, and then it sits there for a long time. It will gradually, sometimes within a year, you can begin to see the deterioration that can result in some failure of materials. Often it will take a little longer than that.
Now you said that it would be a small leak could cause that amount of damage.
Yep.
Well, is it expensive to repair that leak when you first see signs of it?
Most of the time it's not difficult to repair at all, and a gallon of roof cement and maybe a replacement of a shingle that has blown off in a windstorm. And what often happens on our old porches is where they have very low sloped roofs. Mm-hmm. And if they have shingles on them, water can back up underneath those shingles, especially in the winter. If you're repairing your porch, and we'll talk a little bit about this later, you can come up with some treatments of that roof surface that will reduce the chance of those leaks occurring in the future. And sometimes it's difficult to find the leak because you see the water spotting below, but you can't be sure that the water is coming straight down. It may be coming from back up against the house or some other place. So it's a little difficult sometimes to find the spot, but the spot itself can be cheaply corrected.
So the leak usually occurs up on the top part, on
Right.
the roof surface,
Right.
and then travels down. It may not travel in a straight route.
Right.
May go by way of Chicago.
Exactly.
Okay.
And we ignore it because we can't find it, or we try to repair it and we ignore it. Now another place where we get moisture is where we have wood surfaces like this hitting another wood surface on a perpendicular plane like this. And if you don't caulk this seam right here, what happens is moisture comes down the post or it gets on the porch, and then it wicks up inside of the wood, and as it wicks up it spreads the fiber, and as it dries, that happens over and over again. You get deterioration here, but you also get deterioration down here. So it's not uncommon, as we have right here, some serious deterioration of the wood, which then gets to the floor, and then it isn't long before it gets to the corner, and this whole section sags because it's lost its support. And it all goes back to that bead of caulk around this point.
So if you put a bead of caulk in, the best caulking probably costs about $250 or $2.50
$2.50
to do that. And so you can save a porch pillar, and this was a historic pillar, probably cost about $250.
Yeah.
And so by a $2 tube of caulk, you could save a lot of money.
No question about it.
Now, I see that this is wicking up in this. I've also seen where they've cut this wood on the bottom and put a pier, in a sense, to keep the wood from touching or there, and so it dries out. Is that a possibility on this particular one?
It may be. You can cut it out, and there are, and a little later I'll talk about some of the products you can use as wood filler in there to finish that up.
And you see that the nails, because they're wet, are starting to rust out,
Yep.
and so that'll be weakness in the pillar, and although this looks like a new porch floor.
It looks like
here,
a new floor. This has probably had to be replaced, partly because of this kind of problem in the past.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now there's one other thing right behind you, Ray, that I'll point out. A very common place for porches to fail is the steps. And if you have steps that are sitting in the soil like this, the same point I was making before, moisture wicks up, gets into the bottom of this. Now this is probably a pressure treated piece of wood, so it's less vulnerable.
And these steps were part of the violation notice, so they look like they're relatively new, that they bought them in some sort of kit and replaced them. That was one of the violations that they did correct.
But it would be good if, instead of putting this into the soil, even with pressure treated wood, it's not forever, to put a block of stone under there, or a concrete block, and I'll illustrate that in a little bit as well.
Now I see that the water's wicking up, the wood is turning green in a sense, which means that algae is living on the wood, and so that shows that
once it starts, it isn't long before it starts to deteriorate.
Even pressure treated wood.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, although pressure treated wood will last a lot longer, it still can be a problem.
Okay.
Now, the other thing that happens are some structural problems with porches. In some of the great long porches, they use one common joist all the way across the middle of the porch. And it really isn't strong enough to support the weight. And so the bounce in the porch causes the floorboards to pull apart. Then moisture gets into the floorboards, and then the paint peels, and then the whole thing starts to fall apart.
We've had a number of people that come into court in which the porch is falling apart, literally, because it's like a trampoline.
Yep.
And so they're wondering what to do. The inspector says, well, you have to fix the porch, and they just don't know exactly what they need to do.
There are a couple of very simple things you can do, and we'll illustrate those as well.
Okay, good.
And then the last thing is what we do to porches with our cars or with other equipment. Very often our porches are close to driveways, and the car comes in and it bangs a pillar or breaks something along the side of the porch. Then that causes some weakness in the structure. Then that usually causes water to flow in a way it's not supposed to, and we end up with some more deterioration. So number one with porch failure is the water and the simple maintenance that we could do to keep that from happening. The second thing is some structural things that go on in a porch that we can correct, and then being careful not to hit the porch or damage it in any other way with equipment or other things.
Well, we can't guarantee that.
No. Well, let me show you a few things then that we can do to correct some of this stuff.
Okay, I'd like to see those.
Good.
Jim, we're underneath the porch. I have to admit that I've never even been underneath my porch, and so why are we here? And why is it important that we're here crawling around on the dirt underneath this porch?
Well, I can assure the public that you're not hiding out here.
Oh, okay. Great.
Well, Ray, there are a whole lot of reasons why the underside of the porch needs to be paid attention to. One of the first that I see is all the debris that's under this porch. You see this board, carpenter ants just love that kind of stuff. If this board's down the soil, termites get started, and then it isn't long before they move to the house and create problems. So one of the first things you want to do under a porch is get rid of all that debris.
And I can see there has been some insect infestation in that, and I guess carpenter ants love moisture. So a porch provides moisture, at least if it's not drained properly or caulked, and so it is a habitat for carpenter ants, and then once it gets into the soil, provides food for termites as well.
Yep. Yeah. Now, the other thing I want to do under a porch is all of this soil that's under the porch is loaded with moisture, which vaporizes and we don't see it, but it then comes up underneath the porch floor, and over the years can cause some deterioration of the porch flooring from underneath. One of the things that you can do is take some plastic sheeting and lay that plastic sheeting all the way across the soil underneath, and it's usually a good idea to grade the soil under the porch like away from the house first, then put the plastic sheeting down, and that dramatically reduces the amount of moisture coming up out of the soil. You very quickly, when you put the plastic down, will see beads of moisture underneath the plastic, and that's a sign that it is doing its job.
And so you put it down, and then I would imagine that you tack it down or put stones on top of it.
Just lay stones on it around the edge. It doesn't need to be perfect.
Any problem with rodents, harboring underneath it, or?
Well, the primary thing with a porch is to keep large animals out. You're probably not going to keep any little critters out.
Oh, you're not?
Not very, not very
so
successfully.
All of these trellises here are just meant for large animals?
Basically large animals, though some communities now require screen on the back of them as well to try to reduce the even the smaller rodents from getting in.
Is it window screen or hardware cloth that they put on there?
Hardware cloth would probably be more secure.
Oh,
and, but you could put window screen on as well. Now, if we remember, I talked earlier about if a porch has a sag in it and from its original construction. One of the things you can do to give a little support under there, which is a simple thing and you can do it yourself, is get a solid concrete block like this, and you put that down firmly in the soil underneath the area where you're going to want to work, like in the middle of that sagging area. Then you get 1 or 2 or 3 other concrete blocks, and you just stack them.
You don't have to mortar them?
No, it's because we're not out where there's a lot of moisture and there's not going to be a lot of frost heave related to this. So you're basically just trying to get a support under there. You just build the blocks up, and then at the top you'd get a 4x4 post and spread it across the joists like this on top of that last one. You may have to shim just a little bit of extra wood in here, and what you've done is create a support that keeps that porch from bouncing and coming apart.
There are porches. This one appears to have been repaired recently, but there are many porches that have spans of 20 or so more feet, and they become like a springboard and, of course, loosen all the nails.
If you can do one of these in the middle of that, it goes a long way to reducing that problem.
Okay, well, that's a good
thought.
Now,
the other thing, while we're down here, we see these masonry pillars that are here. One of the problems with older porches is often these pillars are not on a footer. They simply dug down to solid soil and set it in place. And what will happen sometimes over the years is if the moisture damage gets down and allows water to drip down along this post, the water getting into the soil can then cause frost heave, and you'll sometimes see these large pillars in the front porch of houses that are tilted one way or the other.
Yes,
Well, the moisture in the soil bonds to the post, and then when it freezes, it lifts and it pushes the post one way or the other. And back to that simple little maintenance thing we talked about where we're caulking around the post, that simple act itself, which would have kept water from draining down to the floor and into the ground, might have kept the post from heaving.
I see. Now these sandstone posts appear to be in pretty good shape after 120 years.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But I've seen number of people who've come before the court where the posts have shifted. It's loosened the porch because it's no longer on the post, and the porches start to deteriorate. And it seems like the porches are the first things to go on a house.
Yep.
And that's because people don't live on their porches, and so they don't notice the moisture and the water running through it.
Right. Now, one of the things you can do, now you would get a bigger one than this, probably a 6x6, but if these have deteriorated or it's going to be a serious expense, what you can sometimes do is take a 6x6 or an 8x8 pressure-treated post, dig down 3 feet, 3.5 feet, put a pad of concrete down there, then set one of these posts in there, and then build your lattice around the outside of this.
Oh, I see.
So now you have a solid base. It's a pressure-treated post, which will last a long time. And for many folks, rebuilding masonry materials is just not in their budget.
Right. Jim, why are we looking at the base of these steps that have just been built recently over here?
Well, a set of steps like this can run $200 to $300. And the primary reason why they fail is if the base of the step is set on non-solid support, or as in this case, the soil is built up around the base of the step, so it causes the wood to begin to erode. Now it does appear that this is pressure-treated wood, so it's less of a problem. And I do hear, you can hear some, looks like a brick under there.
Yes,
So what I would have recommended in this case is simply grade this soil away from the porch so that the wood is not resting directly into the soil.
Or so that the soil isn't up against the wood
or
as
is not
well.
up against it, right. But very often when you see a porch is starting to fail, you see if this rots, then even a 1/2 inch of rot causes the whole porch to rack. And once it starts racking, then the boards start coming loose and the whole thing falls apart.
The stairs risers start to fall apart.
And we're talking a lot of money. Now the other thing that happens, and it would have been good even on this set of steps, this is a riser, I mean the stringer which supports the steps. Now when you have a long step like this, when we have at least 5 feet or more, 6 feet, it's a good idea if you have more stringers than this. See, there's 1, 2, 3, and these are almost 6 feet apart. I mean, 3 feet apart. It would have been good maybe to put one extra one in here, and then that takes some of the spring out of the step and gives more support. And it's not a lot of extra work for the amount of time it would take to do it.
And one further stringer would cost, what do these cost?
$6, $7, $8.
About $8.
Yeah.
And so you can make the steps more stable, less likely to rock and fall apart.
Right.
You recommend now standard studs usually in an older house are 16 inches apart, but 2 feet apart, is that adequate?
Yeah, that would be plenty.
And what about putting the risers on here? These steps don't have the risers.
The one good thing about that is that when you're trying to protect the underside of the porch from animals getting in, you really should put a riser on here, and that will keep the animals out. And then many of the step kits you buy today will have sides on the steps as well, which also helps to keep animals out.
And in some cases I've seen lattice put here to try to keep at least the larger animals out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, those simple things, again, remember it's simple things. In most porch stuff, it's not expensive, fancy things that are required. It's simple things that can make all the difference between whether you have a porch that lasts for a few years or many, many years.
Well, many times in court we've seen simple things ignored. However, they lead to major problems and thousands of dollars worth of cost. Replace a whole porch, and we've had a number of people that have had to do that. We're talking $5,000 to $8,000.
Yeah, exactly. Especially the grand old porches on the front of Cleveland houses, and a porch like this with all the ornate trim and other stuff. Again, $5,000 to $6,000.
And so with materials maybe under $50 worth of materials, you can save
thousands. Without question.
So,
and I have 2 more of those little places I want to show you next.
Okay. Jim, you're about to show us how to solve a moisture problem here using caulk. And I want to ask you about 2 things. One is about the caulk itself. I've seen caulk from 99 cents up to $8 for a tube of caulk. Does it make any difference, the type of caulk that you use?
Well, I usually recommend a good quality latex acrylic caulk. And if you just keep those 2 words, latex acrylic, you'll come up with something that'll be in the $2 to $3 range probably. There is a better caulk, a polyurethane caulk that I like to use between masonry surfaces and wood surfaces.
Oh, I see.
It's a little harder to find, but if you have a good quality latex acrylic caulk, it's fine.
Now this caulk says 15-year caulk. I've seen 5-year caulk, 8-year caulk, and this is 15 years.
Well,
and this house is 120 years
I
old.
won't
so.
Hold my breath on any of those warranties.
Oh, you won't?
No, not for a bit. But the point is, if any of it is there, you're further along than you would otherwise be. And if every 3 or 4 years you have to replace a small portion, that's small price to pay for what you ultimately end up saving.
Let me ask about this caulking gun too. It looks a little bit like a AK-47. It's, the one that I have is pretty tough to use and to squeeze, particularly when you get towards the end of the tube.
Well, I think that's true no matter which one you're using.
Oh, all right.
So you can keep your old caulk gun. This one I like because it has an instant release on it, so you don't have to do the old twist in order to get it to stop dripping out the end of the caulk.
Okay.
You just hit this and it stops. There's also caulk guns you can get that have a little wire on the end that allows you to poke the tube. So you can do everything with a caulk gun, but it works basically. Now, what I just want to demonstrate here is putting caulk in a place that is really critical for caulking, which is right here at the base of this post. Wherever you have two wood surfaces that are butting up against each other, it's really important that you put some caulk there to keep moisture from them getting into that joint. And just take your finger and wipe the excess caulk away. And you will have saved yourself an awful lot of trouble.
And so this is one of the key things that you can do to prevent moisture from wicking up into your porch fillers and also getting down into your foundation. And that moisture goes down and helps heave those foundation
This rots
stones.
out and then the joists rot out. No, that simple bit of caulk can make that difference.
And you could see what happened because the caulk wasn't here. These nails are starting to rust out. You see the discoloration.
Well,
here.
some paint on these would have helped too.
Oh, you need to paint those as well.
Yeah, those need to be painted.
Okay.
Now, another place that, one of the places where, one of the things that happens is you get this kind of rotting of the wood.
And is this called dry rot or?
Well, I think dry rot is really a misnomer because
it's a wet rot.
Wet rot that's ultimately dried
out.
But do I need to replace this whole post? Well, it looks like it's just this small section that's really deteriorated. So you can buy a number of wood fillers, clean this out real good, and then some of them have a wood hardener that you put in first that penetrates the wood.
Those are the epoxies that you have to mix?
No, it's not an epoxy, but it's some are epoxies. And they're quite expensive. You can just use a simple wood filler like a powder that you can put in here because that's better than anything. Now, if this had rotted all the way around the perimeter, then it would be necessary to cut this post off and maybe put a fresh block in, or you can go to those epoxies you're talking about. Some of the epoxies are so strong that you could actually form it under here and it would bear the load of the porch. But for this one, I think you could just fill in some wood filler right here and it would work okay.
And that would work all right and then also not hurt the structural quality of the post?
Because it's just a small part of the post. Now, one of the places where porches deteriorate from lack of maintenance is the main porch deck itself that's not painted on a regular basis. And it's very important to periodically scrape and sand that surface and put a fresh coat of porch and deck enamel on it. But one of the things that happens is, and one of the reasons why we get a lot of deterioration in the end of the porch is the water comes down the porch surface, it runs down on the end, and then it drains back underneath. That moisture sucks into the end of the boards, and the paint starts peeling off of this end. Now, a little trick that you can use that I've used for years on porches, when I put fresh flooring down, I cut a fresh edge, and then I take a piece of 3/4 quarter round, and I take a bead of the caulk, and I put it right here first. Then I press this bead of quarter round into there, nailing it with some finish nails into the surface. And what I've done with that is create a sacrificial edge that will rot over the years from moisture damage, but when it's done its job, you just take it off, put a fresh piece back on, and you save the ends of your porch. I don't know how many times over the years we've had to replace porches because all of these end boards rotted, and we could have saved this whole thing by simply doing something as simple as this.
Now, this 3/4 round is relatively inexpensive, particularly when you talk about buying porch flooring, tongue and groove, and having to try to replace this. This certainly makes a lot more sense.
And it costs very little.
Jim, we're here looking at a porch roof, and you mentioned earlier that there are a number of things that you can do to try to preserve your porch roof, and of course, being part of the whole system, it's one of the things that goes first on a house. What are some of the things that you can do to preserve the porch?
One of the biggest problems, Ray, with a porch roof is almost all of them are very low sloped. Very seldom do you see a real steep slope. The lower the slope, the more likelihood you're going to get some ice backup in the wintertime on the roof. And the other possibility is wind-driven rain getting underneath the shingles. There's a new product that's available now called Ice Guard, which is like a rubberized underlayment material that you put down on the roof surface before you put the shingles down.
Now, do you put that on the entire roof or just toward the end?
Well, normally you just put it around the edge. On a conventional roof, you just put it around the edge. But on a flat roof or a real low slope roof like this, where you want to use shingles, and shingles do look so much nicer on these roofs than the roll roofing. If you can put the Ice Guard down first, then you put your shingles down, what happens is that the nails go through this rubberized material and then it seals around the nail.
I see.
And that way you don't get any leakage, and it makes it possible to put shingles on a roof that otherwise you'd not want to do that.
Now, when you do a new roof, you put underlayment down and then the roof on top of that. So you're saying that put the underlayment down and then at the edge or the whole roof? Or if it's particularly more of a flat roof, you should put more of this Ice Guard on.
Right,
Is that right?
Ice Guard, right. Now what you may need to do is a lot of repairs. Like on this roof, you'll notice that the whole edge of this roof is rotted out. Now it looks like the primary boards back 2 or 3 from the edge are okay. So you're going to need to replace some basic boards first. And it's very important, by the way, to not walk on these roofs if you can't see the underside. I remember years ago I was rehabbing a house and I walked from a second-story window out onto the second-story porch and took one step and just went choo, right through the roof. You have to be very careful because there can be some deterioration, and it's usually best to open up underside first just so you can see what you're doing.
Right.
Be very careful walking on roofs. But here it looks like just one board replace is going to be all it requires to make the repair. Then I would remove all of the roofing material that's there, put that Ice Guard on, then put your shingles. Oh, and by the way, I usually recommend with the Ice Guard bringing it down over the fascia board that's behind the gutter so you block more water getting in between that fascia board and the roof sheathing. Well, those are the basic things that I wanted to share with you about porch maintenance. And again, to make the point we made over and over this hour, maintenance and simple maintenance is the essence of keeping people from having to come to your court to talk about major repairs that they can no longer afford to make.
Well, one of the things that I think is very important, the old saying, a stitch in time saves 9, with a tube of caulk and maybe some roof cement, you could really save a lot of water damage. In many ways, water damage is as bad as fire damage on a home.
No question.
And we've seen thousands of cases come into court on a yearly basis of porches that rot away. And of course, as you say, people don't live every day on their porches, and it's the last thing that they think of, but it's the first thing that goes on a house.
It is.